Was this what you expected this to be like?
I mean, I don't know that I totally knew what to expect, but I think one of the things that made this interesting and has made like your podcast and everything interesting to me is, especially listening to the people who are doing the financial planning, is the kind of like coaching aspect and the kind of like forcing the question or, calling the question sort of stuff. And then I do think I've worked with a financial planner before, a traditional I'm fee only, so not like someone who's trying to sell me, but they have a couple of kids. That's the perspective that they come from. I never even thought about the fact that that was about still having money left when you were done. And that sort of like flipped a thing for me, but I was still just like, but I don't know how to know how that actually applies. It's like, it was really useful for me to have someone take a look and sort of say, oh, no, how this applies to you is if you continue on the path you're on, you're going to have $34 million when you die.
Welcome to the Childfree Wealth Podcast, hosted by Bree and Dr. J, certified financial planner. Here we discuss life and finances as it relates to being child-free. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please consult your advisor before implementing any ideas heard on this podcast.
So in the Child-Free Guide to Life and Money, I lay out a whole bunch of ways that your life, your finances, your taxes, your estate plan change because you're child-free. The problem is a lot of the time you're looking at that and you're like, okay, what do I do next? And how do I actually look at my stuff through this lens? And that's what we've created, something called a Childfree Wealth Checkup to help you with. In the checkup, we take the concepts there in the book, along with all of our stuff around financial planning, investing, everything else, and give your investments, your life, a once-over from a child-free lens. In this podcast episode, you get to watch this in real life. So you'll see me talk to a client, real numbers, real life, real events, and look at it through a child-free lens. And you're going to see these ahas like, wow, I've never thought of that before. Listen in, see what you think. We've got about an hour to hang out together. What would be like ideal? You walk away with like this answer to that question or this thought. What would it be?
I'm hoping to sort of understand a little better what my options are given my financial picture for how to approach either early retirement or kind of winding down and or a sabbatical, like how to think about taking time away from paid work from a financial planning perspective. Those kind of two things are what's on my mind.
That's fair. So if you had all the money in the world and could do whatever you want, what would you do?
Oh man, so many things.
Well, I might as well start with the hard question,
Yeah, sure. I think some national park van life type of stuff. I volunteer with an organization that does stewardship on trails, and I'd love to be doing that on a regular basis instead of whatever random weekend. I can sometimes make that happen. I lived in France briefly many, many moons ago, and I'd love to get some more time to go back and explore that. Have some friends in Switzerland. Would love to do some hiking with them. Yeah, I think the bottom line is find more time in my life to spend outdoors. That's kind of like the uniting thread across all of those things.
Okay. But I saw you're caring for your mom, so that's probably going to be a little bit of a limiter on that. Is that true?
Yeah, for the time being. Mm-hmm.
How's she doing?
She's doing much better. We're not like completely out of the woods yet, but made a lot of good progress in the last few weeks. So that's been really good.
So are you supporting her physically, emotionally, with health, financially? Kind of what's your picture in that?
Yeah, not financially. She's okay on that front. Right now she's living with me temporarily. That's a lot.
Me and my wife say nobody lives with us.
Yeah, totally. And it is a temporary thing because of access to healthcare, basically, because where she lives, she doesn't have great access to healthcare. And where I live, there's a lot more access. So we're sort of working through some things for follow-up right now. So yeah, I would say emotionally to some extent and, physically to some extent at this point. She's pretty independent, but not, driving yet again, or I don't know. It's been great. She's been doing my dishes and folding my laundry.
Just got to be careful. Sometimes mom will have a hip injury. She'll come for recovery. And then 6 months later, you're like, Mom, are you ever leaving?
I don't think that's a risk here. I think if anything, she wishes she could be home now or yesterday.
Understood. I mean, but the plan for parents is going to have a huge impact on you and your life. So that's why I'm checking in on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I am the only child and she's my only parent. And so there's definitely, I mean, I think in one of the things I filled out, I mentioned like seeking Italian citizenship. That's like another thing that's kind of on my fun list, but like I would never consider moving there while my mom is still alive. There's like some longer term things like that will be different depending on how things go with her.
Yep. Who's the Italian citizenship in is your grandparents or kind of?
Yeah, it's through my mom's dad's.
Okay. I've been working, no surprise, probably in this political world, I've been working on a lot of plans for alternative living. Let's call it that.
Yeah.
Have you started the paperwork on the Italian citizenship yet?
I haven't started the paperwork. I sort of did the research to make sure that the heirs had like the right, that my grandfather was born after or before his dad was naturalized. But I found like paperwork for that, but I haven't actually started the process of gathering anything else or identifying a company that I might work with for that yet. It's kind of on the like something to look forward to list.
I'd actually move that up the list because the last time I looked, it was like 18 months-ish for the process. And there's essentially nothing to lose by applying now. Mm-hmm. I have a client who's going through the process now, and it's a little bit of money, but you just work through the process. My wife and I are working through it for hers, for Poland. Like the citizenship by heritage is just really simple. And when your mom's health is better, she might be able to help you with like, where do we find this paperwork? And we're like,
Yeah, I think I have sort of one of my questions about that I haven't really done the research on yet is, do I want to try to do some of that myself or do I want to just pay somebody to do it for me?
Pay somebody. Pay somebody. The budget I tell people is like $5,000. It might not be that entire amount, but like that's a budgetary number. A lot of those documents have to be filed in the native language and the research has
translated,
to be like,
all of that.
And it has to be for the Polish one, because I just did this for my wife. Like it has to be stamped by the consulate and you have to get this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, nope.
Yeah. Pay
the money and just, I would do that. And I would make that something earlier because it then gives you options. Mm-hmm. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Ideally, you'd be traveling more outdoor more. Why don't you do that now?
I think I have times now when I do it more than others. So like a few years ago now, I guess it's been a few years, I shifted my schedule. So I only work 4 days a week. And so for a period I was hiking almost every Monday and then had some sort of setbacks in terms of my own health and the stuff with my mom that kind of got me out of the routine. And so some of it I think is like getting back into the routine of that sort of stuff. But I mean, why don't I do it now? Some of it is my job, and sort of the flexibility or lack thereof sometimes. I mean, I do have a lot of flexibility, but I think it's more the like mental load of that work and sort of finding the mental space to plan ahead. And that hasn't felt very feasible over the last couple of years, just with the cancer stuff and then the mom stuff.
And is your health better now? Are we kind of on the upswing?
Yeah, I'm in a good spot with that, generally speaking.
Good.
But I think it makes the job stuff more complicated, like thinking about working or not working or working with it for myself versus working for another company and insurance and all of that. Like the mental gymnastics of that is much more challenging than the physical part, I think.
So I think I would caution you. The mental gymnastics on that looks harder than it is. Like this afternoon, I just did an ACA plan for a soloist, single with no kids. It was a different state, but just kind of use it for example because it's going to be comparable. And the total out of pocket for the year, max, like you use every penny of it. It's a platinum plan. Like you pay every out of pocket. It was going to be about $9,000. That's not enough to like hold back on your dreams. Mm-hmm. If somebody came to me and said, hey, I want to plan a trip for 10 grand. I'm going to go, great, have fun. So when people like see the care boogeyman, when you actually look at the real numbers, it's not as bad as you think it is. Mm-hmm. How does that feel to you?
I mean, you talked about the political climate too. And I think that's some of what my concerns are too, in terms of like access to healthcare outside the group healthcare sort of thing. And, there's a lot that's unknown about that. I mean, hearing that number as a ballpark, like I probably spent the last couple of years, I've spent that much between various things that weren't necessarily covered by insurance plus my insurance. So it's not a crazy number, but I mean, I think I definitely have something on my list of things to do is like research that myself so that I can, feel maybe a little bit more comfortable with some sort of shift. And I know I've talked to folks before about, if I have my own business, how there's some connections and write-offs related to covering health insurance and things like that. But I've never really looked into the details.
Yeah, the back of the napkin math is about half of the premiums will get written off in your taxes. Mm-hmm. That's close enough to, make it work. Anytime I talk about taxes, it's always like ish because, it depends on your tax return. What would you do if you did your own business?
Well, I've been in the process of getting a coaching certification in the last couple of years, and I've been waylaid a couple times because of other stuff. But I think part of my challenge right now is I thought that's what I wanted to do. And now I kind of need some space to decide if that's actually what I want to do. And part of that, I think, is my interest in the sabbatical or the time away from paid work, because I don't really see the possibility of exploring whatever it is when I'm also doing my full-time job, where like my previous plan might have been like build something up slowly as I'm doing my full-time job. And now that just doesn't seem super feasible because I'm less certain about what it is and feel like it's more of this like exploratory, even like, what is my niche if I decide to do that? Am I going to do courses as well? Or is it just going to be one-on-one coaching? And I think it feels like there's too many questions right now for me to be able to really feel definitively like, this is what I'm going to do next.
That's fair. Anytime somebody's coming into like the coaching planning type world, I always give them advice to look at two questions, which is who do you want to serve and how do you want to serve them? Which is kind of where you're going anyway. But I think if you make it more general, it might be something you can reflect on. Kind of like, who do you have a passion to help? So I serve child-free people. That's just my passion. How do you want to serve them? And you look at financial planning, there's like 17 different models. I mean, there's actually hundreds, but like, whatever different models. How do you enjoy it? Like my background's in adult learning. I do like the group things, but unfortunately it doesn't give as much impact. So like, these are the debates, but when you boil it down to like who and how, that's 95% of the business plan. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's been interesting because I've had the opportunity to do some coaching internally at my current job. They've sort of paid for my certification and I've done some program development with them for that. And so I've had some exposure to different people at like different levels of the organization and with different career goals. And, it's been a nice little laboratory, I guess I'd say, for is this something I want to continue to do? But there's been so much other kind of noise coming from the stuff in my personal life that it's kind of hard to really nail that down and like be a little more exploratory with people who are not corporate employees. Because it's not that I don't want to serve those folks, but like I don't want to serve people in that setting necessarily, unless it's the interest of being paid a high rate so I can get other people to pay a lower rate who don't work in that setting.
Yep, you're on the right page. I did executive coaching, and the problem is you've got like two masters. The people that are paying you are the company, but your person you're coaching is like, and it's like, it didn't feel right. Like it just,
yeah.
But the money's great. So like,
yeah,
it's a balancing act. Do you think it's something else besides coaching, or is it going to be somewhere in that direction?
Yeah, I mean, like my background's in nonprofit program management, and I kind of feel like that ship may have sailed for me at this point. But if I can understand like how much money I actually need to still be able to meet some goals around not working for the rest of my life, then I feel like it might open up some more possibilities for me, like having to understand, I want to make 40 grand a year, or, whatever the amount is. If it's not a very big amount, I might even want to do, but I used to be a pastry cook many, many moons ago. And like, maybe I want to get back into baking as a part-time gig, or, those sorts of things that aren't necessarily like me starting my own business, but maybe even just working in a lower wage environment that might scratch some different itches than the knowledge worker type of stuff that I do now. But, give me some income that help me feel confident and, stable to some extent.
We've got down that your expenses are about $5,000 a month plus your mortgage. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Could you cut that back? And the reason I ask that is like, if you could get the job you enjoy, but you'd have to cut back your expenses, would that be okay?
Yeah. I mean, I could cut that back. That also includes like some home improvements that I've done over the last year or so that aren't necessarily something I need to do every year. And some like things that I probably do partly because I am a little burnt out and it's easy to throw money at stuff that I might do on my own if I weren't in that type of setting, especially when I'm fairly comfortable and still able to meet savings goals and things like that. So I'm sure I could cut that back to some extent. I think since I've sort of been in this, well, I have an opportunity to potentially reduce my hours at work, but still sort of not make the same pay, but have the same rate, I guess I'd say. And I think I'm a little bit on the fence of like, do I want to do that? Because that actually opens up this time for me without having a significant impact to my bottom line from a like salary and healthcare perspective. Or do I really just need a change, like, or a break or both? I don't know. It just feels I'm a little bit in analysis paralysis of this like, wow, I have this opportunity that I could reduce my hours. And why would I go do another job that I would have to do full time to make enough money to support myself and pay maybe for health insurance on top of that? So there's a lot of kind of that calculus, I think, that's spinning around in my head.
And that's why I started my questions with, if you could do anything, what would you do? Like, we get so stuck on this treadmill that you've got to keep doing what you're doing. I was going to ask you, can you do a phased retirement or cut back? And the answer sounds like yes, but that doesn't sound like ideally what you want.
Well, I don't know. I mean, because I think it's also like, trying to understand now, like, where do I need to be? Like, if I could do this job that I have now at reduced hours for a couple more years and get myself to a point where then I'm in a pretty reasonable shape to like even more significantly reduce the amount of income I need to sort of move forward, that might be a different story for me than I need to go do one of these other jobs that doesn't pay as well full time for 8 years or, like, and trying to figure out how do I do that math to kind of say, if I do this for this many more years, it gives me this. And because I can reduce my hours, and have more days off a week, it might actually be worth doing that for a short period of time instead of just taking off.
And that's fair. And I look at your notes and it said kind of there's not a priority of how much money you pass on to the next generation. Kind of that die with zero is an okay concept with you?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you don't care about how much money you have when you die and your expenses are, $5-6 grand a month, why not retire next year?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think I've been in a place to like, I don't think I've done that math. Like, I don't think I've been able to look at that and be like, this is something that's feasible for me or not.
So let me kind of mess with your brain a little. I apologize because I'm going to stir it up.
Yeah, no, that's great.
So you got about a $1.1 million net worth. Your house plus your investments, it's $1.1 million. The back of the napkin math is you can take 4% out of that every year and still have kind of what you started with at the end, which is not your goal. So that's $44,000 a year. Your expenses are like 48 to 60. We're not far off. And that's without doing any work, And what I'm hearing is you're going to do some work, something, but more like something you enjoy. And who knows, maybe that brings in 40 grand a year or something. You can cut out of the workforce. I'm not going to use the word retire because retire tends to be like stop work, blah, blah, blah. But you are at financial independence today.
I think, and maybe this is sort of part of why it's interesting to me to have this conversation with you, is not knowing how the math works with the die with zero idea, not really. Well, there's that piece. And then I think there's also the piece of sort of where my money is, that like 400 plus grand of that is in my house. And also like most of the rest of it is in retirement accounts, IRAs and Roth IRAs and 401ks, and like not understanding the logistics of sort of how to even access that, if that's what I decide to do or need to do to kind of cover expenses if I did stop.
Yep. And one of the things I want to challenge you is I don't want you to focus in on the mechanics yet. This is kind of where I'm like, trust me, I'll show you how the mechanics work. Like, give me a minute, we'll get there. It's more kind of the question of what do you want your life to be like? So this is one of those things that changes because you're child free. The question is, what life do you want to live first, then your finances? The where to get the money and all that is a mechanical thing around financial planning. It's not an issue. There's ways to get access to your retirement accounts before 59 and a half. There's ways to access the money in your house. There's alternative structures. Like, I'm not worried about that. And the bonus I have is I see people like you all the time, and I hate to say it, but you're kind of really normal. Like there's nothing weird, crazy in what you're doing. So I know where the end of the story here goes.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get you there eventually, but where I'm going is conceptually, if you could take that sabbatical, because that sounds like the first one you'd like to do, and take 6 months off and find yourself next year, would you want to do that?
Next year, 2025, I don't know, part of me, while some of this health stuff is sorted out with my mom, kind of wants to have the benefit of someone's paying. I don't know. I'm going back to the money part, not the life part.
Welcome to where we're going. Like, think about financial planning, like investment management. I'm like, that's the easiest part of this. Like, where to put your stock? Like, that's easy. It's kind of like, and what do you want to do with it? And what you're saying right now is, you make a bunch of money at work, whatever it is. I think it was like 150,000 plus bonus, something like that. And you're saying you're unhappy. So what you're saying is for $150,000, you're willing to be unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I can't accept that. You're somebody that had a huge health issue. Usually that's a wake up of like, why am I doing what I'm doing?
Yeah. And I think it has been. And I think now it's just the, like, how do I get to the point of giving myself the permission? I mean, I've left a job before without a plan. Like when I left my nonprofit job, I took about a year off and I, planned for like 6 or 8 months to like have the financial liquidity to be able to do that. And it was great. And I made a total career pivot and that was what it was. So it's not like I haven't experienced being, and then I think I was like experiencing being in that limbo between like, what is my career? What am I doing with my time? With the knowledge that I for sure had to go back and find another job. And I feel like my financial situation now is much different than it was, 8 years ago when I did that the last time. And I think I know intellectually that I have these choices, but it's like hard to get the emotional part. And I don't know if it's like tied up with identity. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what the holdup is or where the fear's coming from. But there's definitely like the little voice that is like, well, if you just waited another year, then more of your stock is going to vest. And, is way more like trying to convince me about that sort of stuff instead of but this job hasn't been fulfilling since before all the bullshit happened. Excuse me. Before the BS happened, with my health and, it's probably not going to be any more fulfilling. I mean, I think part of what's kept me is that opportunity to practice the coaching and, to have the certification, and everything covered by my employer. And so there has been a draw, but as that's kind of coming to a conclusion, like I have a choice of, do I want to try to pursue that internally and try to convince them that that's going to be more of my job, or do I stop? And I mean, I kind of think I need a break. Like, I think there's like some recovery from all of this. And it also is just kind of scary to say like, wow, 6 months from now, would I do that? I'm not there emotionally.
And I'm not asking you to commit to it right this second. What I'm doing is I'm testing it. How it actually would work is, okay, you make a commitment. That's where you're going. We work on a financial plan, figure out the healthcare, figure out the access to money. Like, so you feel comfortable with all the check boxes. Yeah. But the question is a directional one. So what you just gave me for options was, okay, I'm going to see if I can make my current job less sucky, right?
Yeah.
And like, that means I get to save more money. But every dollar you save right now is probably going to your estate, which you said is not a priority.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's also the factor of like, I probably will have some inheritance at some point. I don't know how much it's going to be, so there is probably that is going to be like a little bit of a backup piece. And it's hard to it's hard to unlearn not counting on that, if that makes sense. Like, it's sort of hard to consider that just based on how I have been raised around money and independence and sort of things like that. But I think that's another one, like intellectually I understand it, but I haven't quite given myself permission to. And then I think there is this other piece of, if I do this, if I were to sort of stop and some situation changes, it's not like I can't get another job. I mean, I'm relatively employable. I mean, sure, things happen and that make things might not be my dream job, but I think I know that that's possible. I could change my mind, I guess.
Well, and where I'm going is I'm not counting on your inheritance yet. I would argue that you've got a bunch of planning around your mom that needs to get done.
Yeah.
But we kind of like, no, we're not going to get to that right this, like that's a deeper thing to get to. Where I'm going is, all right, I'm looking at your numbers now. I'm looking at your expenses now. I'm looking at the general. And keep in mind, I look at these unemotionally. Like,
yeah,
they're numbers.
That's why you have a job.
Well, but the thing is, your success with finance, 80% of it's behavioral. And what you just outlined is, hey, I need to change my way of my thinking around this, and then I might be happier. Does that sound fair?
Yeah.
So what we're going to challenge you, and this is kind of just my standard process, is how do we simplify your finances so your life can be amazing? Like, how do we get it to a point where you're just not even thinking about your finances, where you can go live what that amazing life looks like? For what you told me, I don't see you like never working again, but who knows? Maybe you do go work for a nonprofit that doesn't pay a lot. Maybe you do some coaching in areas you really enjoy, where you get paid, but you don't make a lot of money, but you're enjoying it. Like that's the type of stuff I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think even if I put the hat on of like, oh, I want to retire early and have my time, kind of like the work optional idea. There are plenty of things that might be interesting to explore. I just don't have the kind of energy or time to explore them when I'm in a traditional 9-to-5 sort of role. And I think there's also some, how do I put it? Like, there's also some like soul crushing that happens working, this is my first major job in corporate America. And sort of like putting my life force towards, and it's not a bad company. I mean, I work for a great company as far as companies go, but I think it's just that doesn't fulfill me.
Right.
Yeah. It's not that I don't like working. It's not like I mean, even some of the work that I do, I kind of like it. It's interesting, but there's also the like soul sucking component of helping other people sell stuff so people get rich.
I'm with you. Where I'm challenging you is, okay, so now I'm saying you have an option. The way we like to do sabbaticals, we like to do 6-month sabbaticals. The first 2 months, you watch Netflix. And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, like, I literally want you to do nothing because your brain has been in this corporate world. That soul sucking has been forever. And you need like 2 months to just do nothing. Like for you, that might be trails and hiking or whatever, but like nothing productive, if that makes any sense. Which
is actually the experience I had when I did my last break. I mean, I traveled in Asia for 3 months for the first, and it wasn't like a find yourself travel. It was just like go and travel and enjoy it. And then came back and started the process of sort of like, okay, well, what happens next?
Yep. And that's where we go. So the second months are kind of like, all right, let me get some ideas. But what we want in those second months is to start figuring out how would I test those ideas? So that in the last 2 months of the sabbatical, you're like interning or going to school for a course or shadowing people. Like I had people, I want to open a cupcake shop. Okay, go work in a bakery for a month. Like see if you hate getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, or whatever it is. But the bonus is at the end of the 6 months, you might go back and be like, that corporate job was not so bad. I'd like to go back to it. I seriously doubt that's the answer, but you might.
Yeah.
But you might walk out of it and go, yeah, so what I started with, not what I want. I want X. And the way I look at it is, okay, you and I are similar age. What do you want to do with the next 40 years of your life? What do you want your impact to be? For child-free people, the question ultimately is, what is the second line of your obituary? The first one's like, Jay died at this age, at this location. The second line is normally like, father of 3 leaves behind, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's not us. What do you want your second line or impact to be? And that's actually the question to answer during your sabbatical. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you kind of chose the word impact there too, because I think I've had to convince myself that in my current role, I'm having a positive impact. I don't think I'm doing harm necessarily, but it's like quite a bit of convincing to sort of get myself to the point of being like, this is adding to the good of society versus like, in my old job, nonprofits aren't perfect. Like it's a complex system, as I'm sure you understand, but at least I can sort of in that role, I could sort of be like, or at least our intention here is to be doing good. In my role now, I have to work very hard to convince myself of that. And I don't, that's something that I don't like about it. Even if sometimes I do like the work and I do find the work like intellectually stimulating and interesting, and I like the people that I work with, I always get a little bit stuck on that impact. And like, is this an impact that is worthwhile to me? And that's been magnified by sort of, personal events over the last couple of years and made it feel a little bit more intense.
You're doing the mental gymnastics to make this job acceptable. And the gymnastics are getting harder and harder.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
And that takes its toll. I have somebody kind of similar situation. They were like, hey, I get paid a whole bunch of money. In their case, they were actually getting offered to move up the ladder. And she's like, that's just going to make my life worse. Like, what we realized was she was doing a lot of travel just to escape her job. That's kind of that spending you were talking about, that you're spending like my job sucks. So I have to like justify it by taking these amazing trips to make my life feel good for the year or whatever it is. And, it's kind of a version of retail therapy. But the bottom line is your body and your mind are saying, this does not fit, and it's taxing you.
I think some ways how that shows up for me too, similar to the travel, which I think in some years that is something that, applies to me directly. But I think of things that I used to really love doing, like gardening or projects around the house. And like in the context of this set of employment, it's those things become chores. They're not like things that I appreciate doing anymore. And so then I pay somebody to do them. And not only I pay somebody to do them, but also then I'm not getting the pleasure that I used to get out of things that were hobbies and not responsibilities. And all of these things become like responsibilities instead of things that bring me some joy and pleasure and satisfaction of accomplishment. For like one of the things I did when I quit my job before was planned to like redo my whole yard. And that was one of my projects for that time that I had off. And that was super satisfying. And now I barely get out there, even though I know once I get started, time passes as if, like hours could go by and I don't even realize it. But it mentally is this chore that I have to do instead of something that I really enjoy.
Right. So you're saying this is a soul-sucking job.
I guess so.
I mean, I'm not trying to like put words in your mouth, but I'm reflecting back what you're saying. Yeah. And now my question is, how long has it been a soul-sucking job?
Probably most of the time that I've had it. I sort of fell into this job because I was a consultant and my client offered me a more permanent job, and I hated my consulting job. So I was like, sure, sign me up. And then the pandemic hit. It's not to say that there haven't been moments that I have enjoyed the work that I was doing. And I don't think like that career pivot that I did when I went into consulting after being a nonprofit, I'm not sure that it's like I've made the full pivot yet. Something, I don't know how to explain exactly what I mean, but I think the pandemic happened. And so I just stayed, and then cancer happened. And so I just stayed. And I think probably at that moment, when I didn't like my consulting job and they offered me a job, I was just like, sure, I will take your job so I don't have to do this anymore. And I'm not sure that if I had like stopped and reflected at that moment, that I would have continued and done this work. It was more just out of convenience of like, I don't have to go through the effort to find another job. And this job pays really well. And, and then the pandemic hit and it's like, gosh, I should just be happy to have a job. So I'm not sure that it's ever been something that was, there have been moments of fulfillment, but I don't think it's ever something that has been, wow, this is thrilling to me, or this feels very meaningful. There have been individual projects or partnerships that have felt really fulfilling and meaningful, but not the job overall. Probably never has. I haven't said that out loud before.
Well, what I'm going to give you is that is so normal. Like, unfortunately, like most adults get to a point where they're like, how the heck did I get here? Yeah. They're like, yeah, you're like, wait, I'm not happy. How did I get here? And you just walk through. How did you get here? And I can understand exactly the decisions you made. Now, the challenge is to really figure out kind of what you want. You have to get to the harder questions. Like I ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? Which is like tongue in cheek, but it's like, what's the point? Or what brings you joy? What impact do you want to have? And like, I get you when during the pandemic, when you're having health crisis, I don't have time for any of that crap. Like, like it's just, I don't. The reality is you're telling me you should have made a change 4 years ago. Right?
Yeah.
So now the question is, are you going to wait another 4 years or are you going to take action sooner? And what do you think, honestly?
I definitely don't think it's another 4 years. I think I might have a little more unwinding to do to get to like when it is. But I was having, this is a little tangential, but I was having a thought around the impact piece, and something that I feel like would be an interesting coaching niche for me is sort of helping people who are kind of in that stuck part see that there is an alternative. Because I think even though like there are the challenges that I have with my job now, like I also have been able to work myself into a situation where I'm pretty flexible, where I don't work full time, where I didn't take on the responsibility of moving up the ladder, but still was able to increase my salary. Like there are a lot of good things that have come from me sort of having that moment where I stopped and said, what do I want moving forward and what do I don't? Now, maybe the challenge is I didn't catch myself to iterate, some of it being like environmental and situational, but I did catch myself 4 years ago to be like, oh, okay, we learned what we need to learn from there, and now we need to pivot. It's taken me to get to the point to pivot again, but I do think I have that lived experience and sort of understanding of this doesn't have to be the way that you've always been told it had to be. Like you don't have to climb the ladder. You can stay in a role that evolves over time, that doesn't require more hours and more direct reports and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, just as an aside, I think that is like a set of someone who's open to exploring that possibility that they don't have to do it the way they've been told is, a potential set of people that I would be interested in working with.
And by the way, I'll tell you, I work with those people all the time. And one of our top download podcasts is I'll make you quit your job, because like so many people are unhappy. And I'm like, that's having a negative impact on you, your life and everything else. And what I've done with you, just to be transparent, is I took away the excuse of money. See, a lot of people do that career stuff. And even if you've made it better, but it's still kind of not where your heart is. But it's like, oh, but if I do it for 2 more years, I can retire better, or like whatever the stories you tell each other. And people often have like a magic number in their head, like I need to get to $1 million and I can go. Then it's 2 million. And once I hit 2, it's 4. And like just keep moving the goalpost, because it's easier to just keep doing what you're doing than it is to go, what the heck am I doing and why? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And even though I don't have a specific goalpost in mind, like I still think a lot of the calculus that I am doing right now is sort of this, well, it would be irresponsible if I left that on the table, those sorts of things, even though it's probably not real.
Well, what I'm challenging you is the stuff you're leaving on the table, quote unquote, right now is going to your estate, which you said is not a priority.
Yeah.
So essentially you're working to give money to either charities or the government because the government wants their cut. I've had people, I have a client who hit their financial goals. We went through all this same discussion, and they work full time just to give more money away. That's awesome. Like if you're working for a purpose, cool. But right now you're working for dollar signs in your bank account, which you may not need. You're actually unlikely to need. Let's call it that. How does that feel?
How does that feel? I mean, in some ways it feels a little bit liberating. Like there's still part of me that is not convinced. That's like, oh, there's a secret mystery, whatever. But if I can believe that to be true, it's a relief, because it kind of takes the pressure. It just opens possibility. And I think when I'm thinking of how do I make this job that I have work for some period of time until I don't have to do it anymore, whatever that means, like that's eliminating possibility. And the thought that actually there are endless possibilities. I just need to give myself the space to consider what they are. And maybe they'll include paid work and maybe they won't, but that's a lot more hopeful.
Yep. And that's fair. And I'm going to encourage you, whether it's me, someone else, I'm not going to vote on that, but you need a coach to kick you in the butt.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is the same reason why you tell people they need coaches, to call you out and say, is that really what you want? Is that an excuse? Like, it's the way I look at coaching is it balances patting you on the back saying you did great, which you have. You got over $1 million. You've done great. And then the other side is a kick in the butt saying, now what? And that's the hard part, is kind of how do you get that nice, friendly push, but also to get you out of your mind trap of like, or we call it, just that trash that's there saying, well, I have to do it this for this. I can't leave this behind. Like, let me kind of give you a hypothetical. What if, it looks like you take a lot of notes. Are you a journaler by any chance?
Sometimes.
Okay. Do you like writing?
Also sometimes.
So what if you took a year to find yourself, structured somewhat, but you kept a journal, kept notes on it, and use that to create content that then could be your coaching framework if you want. By the way, if you never use it, you can just throw it away. But like literally you dove in and spent a year of going, okay, I got to my mid 40s. I was doing well with money. I'm trying to figure out what the second half of my life looks like, and wrote that as a story. You can share it or not, but now you can coach other people on how to find their own impact, their own story, and use your lived experience to do that. How would that feel?
Yeah, it sounds fairly pragmatic.
Well, does it get to the impact question is really why I'm trying to go. Like, can you share your story and be like, look, I've been there.
Yeah. I mean, I think I listened to a podcast that talks about sort of folks who take breaks in their careers and sort of their thing. And I'd be like, I could be on this podcast, except I feel like I'm in a place right now where I'm not living like my values of that. I'm sort of not doing that, figuring out what it takes to get past that point of stuck and being able to articulate that to other people, I think certainly would be valuable.
And this is where, I mean, you've done enough coaching training to know coaches need coaches. It's kind of how do you get unstuck? And the answer is you find somebody to give you a shove. Like, I feel like that. No, but that really is because when I asked you, hey, would you wait 4 years to change it? You're like, not 4 years. And now you're almost getting like to the negotiation. I'm like, hold on.
Yeah.
Like, when are we going to pull the Band-Aid off and just make some changes? So, okay, we'll get to the brass tacks on this. All right. If you took a year off, you could live off of your inherited IRA. You have access to all that money. It's more than enough to cover your expenses for a year.
I'm not sure what that.
I thought you
it's
you
a
have
rollover.
a beneficiary. Oh, the beneficiary. Okay. It said beneficiary inherited. That's not you didn't inherit. Somebody can. Okay.
No, it's
anyway, we can do it off your brokerage
anyways,
account.
whatever.
But you've got the money to do it. But if you had a plan where you felt good about the finances, could you make the hard choice?
I think so. I mean, I want to be able to say like, yes.
What is the I think so? What is the like little thing in the back of your head that goes, this is my limit? Like, this one's bothering me.
It's a great question. I don't know if there's some junk about, I mean, I know we talked about health insurance already, but I don't know if there's some junk about this false sense of security of being in a job. Like, because I mean, I'm especially because of the type of work I do. Like, I know people get laid off all the time. It's not like my job is secure, but there's like a false sense of security. So like figuring out how, maybe figuring out or understanding more like the precise bits of the financial side would help me get that sense of security. That is maybe part of what draws me, that like stability, security thing that draws me towards predictable paychecks and things like that.
So that's fair, but okay, I'll show you something here. Let me grab my screen here. Hopefully this works. Always the technology is the fun part. You're going to get access to this Right Capital, which is the planning software. We built everything in there. Mm-hmm. And right now we built it off of what you said. I'm going to retire at 54. Okay. And my challenge to you is if I take your current investments, what you put in the money, you're going to die with $34 million.
If I kept working until
54.
54. Mm-hmm.
And we can play with the age, but
sure.
you're dying with $30 million.
Yeah.
To me, that's a $30 million problem. That's not a success with your money. So I think the challenge is, and by the way, that's just a straight line. This actually does simulations, 1,000 simulation markets, better or worse than ever. It thinks 54 million, like boatloads of money you don't need.
Yeah.
All right. And if I have fun with this and I change this and I say, oh, what if you retire at 50? Because that's kind of another one that people have in their head. That's kind of like that's early retirement. I can make that work. Now you're dying with 30 million on this analysis and probably about 20 on the other. So
let's do 45.
well, hold on. Well, I just want to show you this. This is my point. I know I knew where we're going without looking at that. This is the high fancy system that does blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now at 45, it's going to tell me that's not going to work. And the reason is your expenses, but I just showed you how we can fix that, but we'll go ahead and try it. I'm saying some small shifts, you could make it work. And I mean small shifts. At 45, it says you're probably going to run out of money. Now, but what happens is the reason is long-term care. We'll come back to that. We can fix that. If I change your monthly expenses, because this has your house in there too, so I got to change it to $3,500 on top of your house. Mm-hmm. Now you're dying with $9 million. Mm-hmm. Remember what I said about $5,000 a month, including your mortgage? I didn't need the computer to tell me. This just did.
Well, and then there's also the piece of and that's if I don't have any income,
right? Outside
investments, and some of the versions of what would I do in my quote unquote retirement included things like, I'm going to go work at a cross country ski in lodge in Vermont, or things that have minimal pay but have a lifestyle component that is interesting to me, or which I can't do in this moment because my mom, but still.
Yep. And where I'm going is, if I were your coach, here's what I would do. I'd say, one, you got some soul searching to say, do I really want to do this or not? And I'm not saying make a commitment right this second, but yes, is this the right direction? That's number one. Number two, I think you need a good plan for your mom, a good understanding of her situation, her finances, what are you going to need to do there? So that's number two.
I think something that's worth saying at that point too is, if I am not doing my full-time job, it opens up a lot more possibilities for how I support her too, which seems relevant to the consideration.
Right. And that's my point, is we need a plan. We need to look at what that plan is. So that's number two. And then the third is, how do we get past the head trash that says you can't do this? Mm-hmm. Now, I will tell you, I've done this with clients over and over. We usually meet with our clients on a monthly basis. It usually takes about 6 months where they go, all right, we have all the numbers in the right place. We got the plans. And then they do what we call the what if meeting. And by the way, I have a feeling you're one of those. What if this happens? And what if that happens? And what if the market crashes? And what if Social Security doesn't happen? And what if, okay. Mm-hmm. So then we get through the what if meeting. And then they go, oh, I can actually do this. And their head explodes. And I'm not, we call it the child-free midlife crisis. You've hit your personal, professional, financial goals, and you're like, now what? What does that second half of my life look like? And usually there's a moment when you're like, I could actually do this. And it kind of gets a little scarier for a second, because you're like, but I was saying in my brain I couldn't do it for another 10 years or what?
Yeah.
Nope. The only thing holding you back is you.
Well, and I actually think, some of that moment is kind of even seeing the numbers that you just showed me, seeing the difference between, gosh, if I cut my expenses a little bit, or if I just make up that difference and I make $1,500 a month to still spend $5,000 a month or whatever, that doesn't seem like very much, that's not, that's a part-time job, baker down the street, or whatever, or that's a couple of coaching clients or an occasional contract somewhere doing coaching or learning development or whatever.
And this is my point. You're starting to see this is possible. Mm-hmm. And then the hard part is oh, do I really, am I ready for a change? Do I want to do this? Because the money disappears. I know the end of your story, which is you're going to realize I have every option. What I don't know is, what do you do next? Do you take time and just figure it out? Do you do something on the side? Do you cut back on work? I don't know that answer. But the difference is you start making decisions not for money. You know, the test I'm going to give you is, if money did not matter, would you do your current job? And you're going to say no.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Well, then why are you doing it? Like, and that's where, you know, people worry about in finance, like the numbers of it. And I'm like, that's the easy part. Like, I get, the computer does that pretty quickly. Like, I know where it's going to go. But the harder part is this mental model stuff, the behaviorals around it. It's the stuff you want to coach others on. It's the stuff you need to get your own coach and work through. How you feeling? I throw a lot at you. I mean, we spent almost an hour talking about this. Like, how you feeling?
I think the wheels are turning. Like, I think what I'm not worried about is figuring out what to do if I don't have a job. Like, I'm not at all worried. I have plenty of hobbies and ideas about all of that sort of stuff. So I think this piece about the head trash, like, how do I, that absolutely is sort of, you know, what I need to figure out. So that's, but I sort of think this is like, is this going to happen in 3 months, 6 months, or a year? You know, like, those kind of feel like the time horizons. Like, if a year from now, if I'm still, or maybe like a year and a couple weeks, because might as well get the, like, you know, there's the money talking bonus thing for whatever. But,
and by the way, I have told people, like, hey, if you work 3 months more, you get 40 grand. We're going to do that. Like, you know, like, but we're not going to be dumb about it. But yeah, my challenge, I had already
kind of had an idea in my mind of March of 2026. But I feel like where I'm at now is like, why would I wait that long? Which is a little different than the beginning of the conversation.
Yep. And my question is, when do you start working on the plan?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can quit in March of 2026 still. But if you wait until, you know, November of 2025 to work on the plan, you might not be ready then. You know, we've actually tracked this with our clients. We'll have this discussion. I kind of stir up your brain, you know, kind of think through things. The next day, you'll know if some of this makes sense or not. Like, there's that moment when you get in the shower and you're like, I could actually do this. Or you get in the shower and you're like, yeah, that makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
And we've tracked it. And what happens is people usually sign up as clients for us a week or two, maybe a month max after we meet with them initially, or we see them a year later. Like, I've tracked it down to, like, I can almost tell you the month I'll see them. And what it is, it's a question of, are they ready to dig in? And there is absolutely nothing I can do to help people on that. Like, there's no way I can give you motivation, kick you in the butt and say, it's time. It's when you're ready. And what happens is 9 times out of 10, when they come back a year later, they're like, yeah, I've been thinking about what you've been saying. I should have done it a while ago. Don't tell me that. Let's get to work. You know, it's like kind of like almost like an Eeyore thing to it. Like, yep, I know. Okay. And I don't judge them. Like, when you're ready, you're ready. It's just the question of, you've actually needed to do this for 4 years. So when do you take the first step? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And this is the coaching thing. You know, you work with clients and some people just aren't ready for coaching. You look at them like, yep, I'm wasting my time. Like, I got no problem firing a client. Like, you're not ready to change. We'll come back when you're ready. And then you get the others, you're like, you've been ready for a while, but you just either don't believe in yourself or don't believe in the numbers or whatever else it is. It's just like, okay, what's going to light the fire? And unfortunately, all too often, what ends up lighting the fire is something bad happening. So I'll get the people, they hate their job, and like, that'll have a medical impact on them. How many people have a heart attack because of their job, or, you know, strokes, or all these things? And I'm like, your body just told you this is not working. You didn't listen the first time. Like, it's interesting because people like don't believe me that your job can have that much impact to your body, but it does. It really does. You were talking about it. You took the joy out of gardening. Like, that's wrong.
Yeah.
So I'm going to send you after this. We have our checkup form. It'll have a whole bunch of things. Like, there's some things like your homeowner insurance. I think you should up the limit a little bit. Like, there's some small things in there, like just to do housekeeping. But I'm going to challenge you that it's not about the finances in this discussion. It's about the life and the behaviors. Does that make sense? So I've spoken a lot, asked you a lot of questions. What questions do you have for me?
I think you've answered many of the questions. I kind of had some questions coming into this, and I think you've answered a number of them.
This was probably not what
sort
you
of made
expected.
them irrelevant.
So was this what you expected this to be like? Or, I mean...
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know that I totally knew what to expect, but I think one of the things that made this interesting and has made like your podcast and everything interesting to me is, especially listening to the people who are doing the financial planning, is the kind of like coaching aspect and the kind of like forcing the question or, calling the question sort of stuff. And then I do think I've worked with a financial planner before, a traditional I'm like fee only, so not like someone who's trying to sell me a bunch of shit or anything. Sorry. But they have a couple of kids. That's the perspective that they come from. And I don't even remember how I originally, I think it was through the the CoastFi YouTube that you did is like the first thing where I was exposed to you all. And I just had never thought about how it was different. And I thought of like the conversation I had with my financial planner where she showed the Monte Carlo stuff. Like she uses Right Capital. So I had seen it before. And I never even thought about the fact that that was about still having money left when you were done. And that sort of like flipped a thing for me, but I was still just like, but I don't know how to know how that actually applies. So it's like, it was really useful for me to have someone take a look and sort of say, oh, no, how this applies to you is if you continue on the path you're on, you're going to have $34 million when you die. If you even live to 90, because I think there is that thing too, once you're a cancer survivor too, of like, I might not be planning for that many years. It's hard to kind of know. All the more reason to like spend it now. All of that is to say, it somewhat was what I expected because it sort of gave me the like financial side, but then also I'll call it emotional side. I mean, I do think that there's more than just emotions there, but
yeah, you're on the right page. The way I look at it is the investing and the numbers of this is probably less than 20% of the work I do because that's the easy stuff. Like you don't need
but it is like nice though, especially for someone who like has thought a lot about money and who's like, my dad was like obsessed with tracking every sort of thing like that. It is sort of nice to have someone who has like a larger sample size to be able to say, oh no, I've seen this before. I know sort of how this works out. And it doesn't have the emotional stuff to actually sort of look at a number like that. It's reassuring, like it's validating. It sort of gives potential permission to help sort of get past some of the other stuff when someone is like, I'm taking this out of the equation. And it's hard to kind of do that yourself without the larger context of that big sample of people. So I appreciate that.
And the sample I'm working with are all child-free people. I mean, we have a couple parents, but it's very minimal. And I've seen your story. I know where this goes. And I think one of the things I'd caution you on is it sounds like you're probably reading and Googling a little too much, because all of that has assumptions in it that don't match you. I love the fire folks, but man, they missed the boat, which is, what am I going to do once I'm retired? Like, what's the point? If you Google, everything assumes you have kids. Everything assumes you want to pass this money to the next generation. Everything has assumptions in there that just, the data is no good. And that's the challenge. I mean, I would encourage you, ask your planner how your plan is different because you're child free. And unfortunately, most of the time, the answer is, oh, well, you'll change your mind. And I'm like, yeah, that's not an answer. Or they'll say it's not different, which is just as bad of an answer.
A worse answer.
But, what happens is I'm actually okay if they say, I don't know. We'll figure that out. And then there are others that are like, I had somebody, they asked their planner, how's it different? And they said, well, I have other child-free clients. And I'm like, that's not answering the question. Like, you're not getting there. And that's the hard part is they could be giving you good financial advice, but missing your life and the way you want to live it on the way by. And it's not because they're doing anything wrong. It's just, they just don't think of it that way. So in the notes, it'll have, if you want to work with us, we work with people on an annual basis. We usually meet monthly for the first year, get your plan in place. I know what's going to happen for yours. You're going to need about 6 months to get comfortable with everything. And then you're going to need to shift your mindset. When you're ready to do that work, you can start whenever you want, but it's one of those challenges of you probably got 6 to 12 months of work to do to then feel comfortable to then do the next step. I don't know what that is, but like getting yourself in that place. And it just, there's no fast button for this. Like you got to, you even said it, like my dad's voice in my head, like you got to get those voices out of your head. And it takes a while because you're living a different life than what they had. And how do I get good at, and the challenge is what I try to do when I'm working with clients is I try to work on 1 to 2 issues each month, and we'll usually work on 1 or 2 kind of behavioral, emotional, whatever you want to call it, and 1 or 2 kind of simple financial stuff because we got to check the boxes. And what happens is each month you make a small shift in the way you think. And at the end, you're like, oh, this can happen. And it's not that giant leap. Yeah, if I had my way, you'd quit your job in March of 2025.
I am kind of a giant leap person. Like once I decide, and it's
awesome.
Done. And I may have I'm going to take 4 months to get there, but once, I don't know, I wouldn't be surprised if it's faster than it seems like it might be in this moment. So we'll see.
I'm giving guesstimates just because I've done it, but everybody has their own speed. The biggest determinant of that speed for you will be when do you start? That's it. It's kind of like, so that's why tomorrow morning, I want you to literally sit there and go, did my brain shift at all? Did the way you're looking at it shift at all? If the answer is yes, then maybe we should work together and keep going. If it's no, you haven't found the right partner to kind of coach and work through this and grow that next thing, or you're not ready for it. And that's okay too. I think the challenge is, I tell everybody, you've got some momentum because you just did this meeting. If you let it sit for too long, you lose the momentum. And then you have to kind of restart again. So you got to find what pattern works for you. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So we're going to send you all the information. We're going to send you, got some housekeeping things to do. In general, I looked at your investments. There's some tweaks I would do, but nothing that really would make a huge difference. And I'm just being transparent on that. That's the easy stuff. Your questions about should I sell the house and rent? I don't know. Good question, but not necessarily the first one to answer. There's some things on the insurance, little things to optimize there, but overall, your finances are in decent shape. It's just optimization, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then if you have any questions, you can email us and happy to help you. But do you feel like we got to kind of what matters to you today?
Yeah.
Okay. Any last questions or concerns?
I don't think so. No, thank you.
All right. So you just watched or listened to, depending on how you get your podcast, a Childfree Wealth Checkup with a real client. You saw us dive into things like life planning, investments, taxes, estate planning, financial fundamentals, insurance, everything. And they got a report at the end that says, this is what's working, this is what's not. When I first designed it, it was created around this concept, you go to get your oil changed and you get kind of red, yellow, green of how your tires are and your windshield wipers are and all that. So you saw the report, but what you also saw was the discussion that goes with it and those aha moments. If you want a checkup like that, you can grab one on our website, childfreewealth.com. You can meet with a Childfree Wealth specialist. You give us a whole bunch of information. We'll look at it. We'll do the entire report, spend an hour with you, and figure out where you're at. Is it working? Is it not? What can you do by yourself? What you might want some help with? And look at it through a child-free lens. If you're a DIYer, this is a chance to have a professional look at your stuff and say, here are your unknown unknowns. If you're one of those that might want help, it's a great step to working with a financial planner and working with somebody who understands how your life and financial plans are different because you're child-free or permanently childless. Schedule your checkup today at childfreewealth.com.
If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a rating or review. We'd love to keep the conversation going. Please let us know your thoughts wherever comments are available or email us at media@childfreewealth.com. To stay up to date, find and follow Childfree Wealth on social media. If you're interested in working with us, learn more by visiting our website, childfreewealth.com. We'll see you next time.